The sailor. A room, doubtless in an ancient castle. From inside one sees its circularity. At center, on a bier, a coffin holding a maiden in white. 4 candles at the corners. On the right, almost directly facing whoever imagines the room, a single window, tall and narrow, through which can be seen, between 2 distant mountains, a small patch of ocean. Near the window 3 figures hold a watch for the deceased. How long have we been here? Don't worry, soon it will be morning. Let us remain silent, life wants it that way. Outside the house where I was born there was a lake. I used to go there and sit on the shore, on a tree trunk that had fallen at the water's edge. I'd sit on the tip, feet dangling in the water, and stretch my fingers toward the base. Then I'd stare for too long at the tips of my feet, but not in order to see them. I don't know why, but it seems this lake never existed. Remembering it is like not being able to remember anything. Who knows why I say this and whether it was I who lived what I remember. We are sad when we dream by the sea. We can't be what we want to be, because what we want to be, we want always to have been. When the wave spreads and the foam hisses, it seems at least 1,000 voices speak. The foam seems novel only to those who judge it as one thing. Everything is many, and we know nothing. Would you like me to tell you the story of what I was dreaming by the sea? You can tell it, brother, but nothing in us needs to hear you tell it. If it's beautiful, I already foresee the sorrow of having heard it. And if it's not beautiful, wait. Tell it only after altering it. I will tell it to you. It isn't entirely false, because certainly nothing is entirely false. It must have been like this. One day I found myself resting on the cold summit of a cliff, and I'd forgotten that I'd once had a mother and a father, that I'd harbored within me a childhood and other days. And that day I saw in the distance, like something I would only have imagined, the vague passing of a sail. Then it vanished. When I returned to myself, I saw that I already contained this dream. I don't know where it began, and I never went back to see another sail. None of the sails on the ships here resemble that sail. It was foreign, and although I can't remember its symbol exactly, I can still feel what I felt at that moment. Sorrowful bliss, recognizing something that never existed. From the window I can see a ship in the distance. Perhaps it's the same one you saw. No, brother, the one you see is bound for some harbor. It wasn't possible that the one I saw sought any harbor. I was dreaming of a sailor who was lost on a distant island. On this island there were a few stiff palms, vague birds flitting among them. I couldn't see whether any had perched on the branches. The sailor had lived there since his shipwreck. Because he had no way to return to his homeland and suffered whenever he remembered it, he set out to dream a homeland he'd never had, to make it so that it was his, and had always been, a different kind of country with other landscapes, other people, other ways of walking down streets, of leaning out windows. Every hour he built in his dreams this false homeland, never ceasing to dream, by day in the brief shade of the great palms that cast their beaked images on the hot sand, and by night stretched on his back on the beach, heedless of the stars. May there never have been a tree that cast on my outstretched hands the shadow of a dream like that one. Let him speak. Don't interrupt, he knows words the sirens taught him. I'm going to close my eyes so I can listen to him. Speak, my brother, speak. My heart aches that I wasn't you when you were dreaming by the sea. For years and years, day after day, the sailor, in one continuous dream, constructed his new native land. Each day he added an imagined stone to his impossible edifice. Soon he had a country already many times traversed. Thousands of hours he'd remember of having passed along its shorelines. He knew the usual color of twilight in a northern bay, and what it was like to glide, late at night, with one's soul basking in the murmur of ship-parted water, into a large southern port he'd erstwhile visited, perhaps happily, in his supposed youth. "Brother, why have you stopped? One mustn't speak too much. Life is always watching us. Every hour is the mother of dreams, but we must not be aware of that. Look, the horizon is paling. Morning can't be too far off. Hurry and tell us more, tell us again. Say nothing about who might be listening. We never know how many things are truly alive, watching and listening. Go back to your dream." The sailor, what was the sailor dreaming? First he created landscapes, then he created cities, then streets and alleys, one by one, chiseling them into the substance of his soul, one by one the streets, neighborhood by neighborhood, as far as the walls of the quays where he then created the ports. One by one the streets, and the people who passed through them and watched over them from their windows. He began to encounter people he scarcely recognized. He'd get to know their life stories, their conversations, and all this like one who goes on seeing a landscape he's merely dreamed. Then he traveled, by memory, across the country he'd created. And thus he built his past. Soon he had lived another life. Already, in this new homeland, he had a birthplace, places where he'd spent his youth, ports he'd embarked from. He began to have had childhood companions and later the friends and enemies of manhood. Everything was different from what he had known, neither the country, nor the people, nor his own past resembled what had actually been. Should I go on? It makes me so sad to speak of it. Now, because I'm speaking of this, I'd rather speak of other dreams. Go on, even if you don't know why. The more I listen to you, the less I belong to myself. Is it really a good idea to go on? Does every story have to have an end? But speak anyway. It matters so little what we say or don't say. We'll keep watch over the passing hours. Our task is useless as life. One day, after heavy rains, the horizon still a blur, the sailor grew tired of dreaming. He wished then to remember his true homeland, but realized that he could remember nothing of it, that it didn't exist for him. The only boyhood he remembered was the one in his dream country, the adolescence he remembered was the one he'd created. All his life had now been the life he'd dreamed, and he saw that it was impossible for any other life to have existed. If he recalled not a single street, not one figure, not even some maternal gesture. As for the life he thought he had dreamed, everything was real, had actually been. He couldn't even dream another past or conceive of having had a different one, something everyone, for a moment, can imagine. Oh brothers, my brothers. There's something I haven't told you, I don't know what, something that would explain all this. My soul chills me. I barely remember having spoken. Talk to me, shout, so that I may wake up, so I may know that I am here, before you, and that there are things that are merely dreams. I don't know what to tell you. I don't dare look at things. What happens next in the dream? I don't know what happens next. I barely know. Why should it go on? But what happens after? After what? Does after mean anything? One day a boat came by. One day a boat came by. Yes, it could only have been that. One day a boat came by, and it passed that island, and the sailor wasn't there anymore, he was nowhere to be found. Perhaps he had gone back home. But to which one? Yes, to which one? And what could have become of him? Will anyone ever know? Is it absolutely necessary, even in your dream, for there to have been that sailor and that island? No, brother, nothing is absolutely necessary. At least tell us how the dream ended. It didn't end. I don't know. No dream ends. Can I know for certain that I'm not still dreaming without knowing it, or that the dreaming itself isn't this vague thing I call my life? Don't talk to me anymore. I begin to be sure of something, I don't know of what. Then, during some night that isn't this one, they advance toward me, the footsteps of a horror I don't recognize. Who would have been likely to wake up during the dream of mine that I've recounted to you? I have a grotesque fear that God may have prohibited my dream, which is doubtless more real than God allows. Let's not think any more. Let's not try to follow this interior adventure. Who knows what's at the end of it? All this, my brothers, happened in the night. We must never speak of it, not even to ourselves. I loved listening to you. Of course I know it wasn't worth the trouble, that's why I loved it. That wasn't why, but let me say it was. Besides, the music of your voice, which I listen to more than the words, leaves me, perhaps simply because it is music, discontent. Everything leaves us discontent, brother. People who think get tired of everything, because everything changes. Those who die prove it, because they change with everything else. Only the dream is eternal and beautiful. Why are we still talking? I don't know. Why do we die? Perhaps from not dreaming enough. That's possible. It wouldn't be worth the trouble, then, to close ourselves into a dream and forget life, so that life might forget us? No, brother. Nothing's worth the trouble. A rooster crows. The light, all of a sudden, brightens. The three watchers remain silent, not looking at each other.